Mrs. Went here. Today we're going to talk about the importance of audience. Unless you like talking to the wall, it's important to know who your audience is so that your message reaches the mark. A real-life example is advertising. You have sellers, and they have a product, and we'll put that kind of in the middle here. And they have this product. They need to decide what group of consumers will be interested in their product. So they have to know their consumers, and advertisers do this in a number of ways by doing surveys and market research and so on. And so the sellers create an advertisement, and they have to find out what is the best format for that advertisement. TV, radio, internet advertisements, billboards, and so on. And most of the time, it's an entire advertisement campaign. You hear these advertisements from all over the place. And hopefully, the sellers are hoping that all these advertisements will build that connection between the product, that's what the advertisement stands for, and the consumer will buy that product. Now, if the advertisement is offensive, some consumers will break that connection and they will not buy the product. Sometimes they are so offended that they want to break the connection with the company. Here's an example of the importance of matching your product with your audience. Now, I know I'm kind of going off of some stereotypes, but this is just an example. In my Google search engine, I typed in aftershave for young men, and I found a clip art picture of a young man. And so one of the sites suggested that Hugo Boss has good aftershave for young men, and it's probably a bit trendy. On the other hand, and you might notice this from the new commercials for Old Spice, is a lot of young men might consider Old Spice to be their granddad's or their daddy's aftershave, and they might steer away from that because they don't want to be considered old. But Old Spice is reinventing their image to try to appeal to that younger generation. Now, when we talk about writing, let's translate this. This is called the rhetorical triangle. And a triangle is a useful graphic for considering the communication process. For written communication, you have the text, the written part, you have the writer, the person who created the text, and you have the audience, or your readers. And you also have the context. We didn't talk about the context when we talked about advertising, but the context involves everything around it. It involves knowing the background of your audience. It involves the timing. If you send a text message at the wrong time to your friend, you may not get the same response back that you had hoped. So the timing of something is important. The format. If you write an essay and you don't put it in the correct format, you might not get the grade you want. If you type a blog post and your font is difficult to read, you may not get readers to read it. There's a lot of issues involved in context. And we'll talk about that a little bit more as we go. But context just encompasses pretty much the entire real-life situation of this communication act. So let's talk about the writer and the three aspects of this triangle in depth. The writer is obviously the creator of the text. And as we read different articles in this course, and as you write, you have to keep in mind that the writer is working towards a purpose or a goal. The writer has some goals in mind for why they are writing. And it's important to keep in mind the text and the audience and the context as you write. The next thing you want to decide is who is supposed to read your writing. Now, if you are going to write a journal entry on your own, obviously you are the writer, and you're writing it to maybe relieve stress, maybe to remember something, or get your thoughts down on paper. You're writing a to-do list for you to take to the store later. If you're writing to your friends on Facebook or texting them, then you know your friends very well. In college, when you're writing for school, you don't know your audience very well, and most of the time your instructor will give you a pretend audience. I might, for example, have my students write a compare and contrast essay, but their audience is a future business client. So I try to give them some real-world audiences to imagine and to give their writing a sense of reality. Now, if you are in an office later on, or now, or maybe you're a nurse and you're in the medical field, your audience might be a doctor, it might be an insurance company, it might be for the patient, but you have to know who your audience is and the purpose. So we could add purpose in between the audience and the writer. Now the text, obviously depending on the audience and the purpose, will determine the kind of text that you're going to write. It could be a text message, article, blog, essay, novel. I have my students do little journal entries in Blackboard just to get their thoughts and so on. So that determines that. Now, if you do not know your audience, let's say this happens a lot in education. It's a female teacher, and she has a mixed gender class. And she doesn't mean to, and you could put teacher here. Whoops, it's hard to write in PowerPoint. Teacher. And you could put the text, you could put just the class. And you might do this in your essays too, and you want to keep this in mind. But as a female, she might, and there are females in the class, she might use a lot of examples that are more sort of female instead of neutral. And so she might isolate, she kind of breaks that connection with her male students. She doesn't offend them, but she doesn't really draw them in. So they start to lose the connection in the class. So she is not keeping track of her audience. She's not keeping her audience in mind. This could happen again as a student writer. And you might be asked to write an essay about, let's do the compare and contrast example again. So your audience is a potential business client, and you have to convince them to use your company. So you're trying to convince them. Well, you just say, well, our company is better than the competition. And you sort of go on and on and on about it, but you never really give them statistics or good examples. And so you are kind of breaking that connection between the audience and the text, because you have to deliver this to local businesses to convince them to use your services. You're not there to talk to them in person and answer questions. So you have to envision what their potential questions are going to be. And because your text is not very strong, that's going to break your connection as a writer to your audience. So hopefully this little lesson is a demonstration of how audience can be very important when you are writing an essay. For reading, it's very important. This could be the reader, and you can kind of reverse this. So as you're reading, you're going to want to ask yourself, who is this writer? What is their purpose? And does this text make a connection with me? If you find that as you're reading, you're struggling a little bit with the article, you might take comfort in the fact that you are not actually in the intended audience. That doesn't mean you're not welcome to read it. It just means that you might struggle a little bit. We're going to read some articles later on in the semester that are really geared towards different groups of people. And as students, you're not quite in your professional environment yet, or you might be. If you're in the nursing field, you might be a CNA already and be working towards your RN or something like that. So you do have some experience and exposure in that field. So you might understand a medical article much better than, for example, even me, who has more experience in the education and writing fields. So just keep in mind that audiences are very specific, and that determines the text and the writer. And thank you for watching this lesson on the importance of audience.